Chapter 1. The Worthless One. The rain came down in sheets, turning the forest path into a river of mud that sucked at Alara's worn boots. She stumbled, catching herself against a gnarled oak, her breath coming in ragged gasps that had nothing to do with exhaustion and everything to do with fear. Behind her, perhaps a mile back, the village elders would have discovered her absence by now. They would be gathering torches, sharpening their righteousness into something that could cut. Useless girl. Barren. Cursed. The words had followed her for 23 years. Whispered behind hands, spat across market stalls. When the crops failed, they blamed her presence. When old man Werner's cow birthed a stillborn calf, they said her shadow had touched it. Never mind that Alara had spent those same years teaching herself to read from stolen books, learning the old languages, mapping the stars. Knowledge meant nothing when your mother died birthing you, and the midwife declared you touched by darkness. Thunder cracked overhead, and Alara pushed deeper into the woods. The forest here was ancient, the kind that appeared on no maps, where trees grew so thick, their canopies blotted out the sky. She'd heard the stories. Travelers who entered never returned, or returned changed, drained of something essential. But monsters in the dark seemed preferable to the monsters with human faces she'd left behind. The path, such as it was, ended abruptly at a wall of thorns. Ilara's heart sank. She turned, scanning for another route, and that's when she felt it, the sensation of being watched. Not the way the villagers watched her, with disgust and suspicion, but with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Slowly, she lifted her gaze. He stood 30 feet away, utterly still in a way no living thing should be still. Tall, impossibly tall, easily 7 feet, with shoulders that blocked the narrow path behind him. His coat was black and heavy, belonging to another century, and his hair fell past his collar in dark waves that gleamed despite the lack of light. But it was his face that stopped her breath, carved from marble and shadow, beautiful in the way ancient cathedrals were beautiful, with eyes that caught the lightning's flash and threw it back as crimson. Lost? His voice rolled through the rain like distant thunder, neither kind nor cruel. Alara's fingers found the small knife at her belt, though she knew instinctively it would be useless. Leaving. From the village. Not a question. He tilted his head, nostrils flaring slightly. They've marked you for death. I can smell their fear on you, and your blood. His gaze dropped to her hands, where thorns had cut her palms when she'd tried to push through the barrier. You're bleeding. I'll manage. She took a step back, then another. The thorn wall pressed against her spine. Will you? He moved then, and it wasn't walking so much as flowing, the space between them collapsing in a heartbeat. Up close, she could see the inhuman perfection of him. Skin too smooth, features too symmetrical, beauty that hurt to look at directly. They're following. 20 men with torches and rope. You have perhaps 10 minutes before they find you here. How do you... But she knew. The stories were true then. Her village sat at the edge of the Bloodwood, and the Bloodwood belonged to them. To him. You're one of the Night Walkers. Vampire, he corrected, something like amusement flickering across his features. The clinical term lacks poetry, but it's more accurate than your folk tales. He studied her with those impossible red eyes, and Alara felt pinned, catalogued. You're different. You've taught yourself the old script. I can see the ink stains on your fingers, smell the musty parchment. Unusual, for a village girl they call worthless. Rage flared hot in her chest, burning away fear. You don't know anything about me. I know you're about to die in these woods, either at your neighbor's hands or from exposure. The temperature will drop below freezing tonight. He paused, head tilting again, listening to something she couldn't hear. They're closer. 8 minutes now. Why do you care? His smile was slow, revealing teeth that were perfectly normal until they weren't. Until she caught the slight elongation of his canines, the predatory edge. Perhaps I don't. Perhaps I'm simply curious about a girl the world has deemed useless, who nonetheless fights to stay alive. He extended one hand, palm up, an oddly courtly gesture. I'm offering you a choice. Take your chances with the mob, or accept shelter in my domain. One night. Tomorrow you may leave unharmed if you wish. And if I accept? What do you want in return? Conversation. At her skeptical look, he added, I've been alone in these woods for longer than your village has existed. The politics of immortality grow tiresome. I simply want to talk with someone who might actually be interesting. In the distance, Elara heard voices rising above the storm. The decision crystallized, certain death behind her, possible death before her. But possibility meant choice, and she'd had so few of those. She placed her bleeding palm in his. His fingers closed around hers. Cold, but not unpleasantly so. Firm. Real. I'm Elara. Constantine. He pulled her forward, away from the thorns, and the wall parted like water. Welcome to Thornhaven, little scholar. Try not to die before morning. The forest swallowed them whole. Chapter 2. The Manor of Shadows. The manor materialized from darkness like a memory surfacing from deep water. All Gothic spires and weather-stained stone, its windows black and empty as a skull's sockets. Elara's breath caught. She'd seen ruins before, remnants of the old nobility scattered across the countryside. But this was no ruin. This breathed with a presence that made the hair on her arms rise. Constantine led her across a courtyard where weeds had long since conquered the cobblestones, up marble steps worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, through doors that opened soundlessly at his approach. Inside, candlelight bloomed to life without anyone lighting it. Dozens of candles in iron sconces, their flames dancing in no breeze she could feel. The manor responds to its master, Constantine said, catching her stare. One of the few advantages of permanence. Enough years in a place, and it begins to know you. The entry hall stretched before them, vaulted ceilings disappearing into shadow above. Portraits lined the walls, men and women in ruffs and velvet, powdered wigs and armor, spanning what had to be 500 years of fashion. In each painting, somewhere in the background or standing just behind the primary subject, she found him. Constantine, unchanging. You've been here all along, Elara whispered. Hidden in plain sight, not hidden. Simply patient. He shrugged off his soaked coat, draping it over a chair that had probably cost more than every possession her village owned combined. Beneath, he wore a simple black shirt that clung to his frame, revealing the lean muscle of someone built for violence, not decoration. The noble families knew what I was. We had arrangements. They're all gone now. The last died in the wars 70 years ago. I remain. He gestured toward a sitting room where fire crackled in a hearth large enough to roast a pig. Elara approached cautiously, drawn by the promise of warmth. Her dress was soaked through, heavy with rain and mud. She knelt by the fire, hands extended toward the flames. There are dry clothes upstairs. Third door on the left. Constantine moved to a sideboard, pouring something amber into a crystal glass. You'll find them old-fashioned but serviceable. Elara didn't move. You said you wanted conversation. We can start with truth. Why am I really here? He turned, glass in hand, and regarded her with an expression she couldn't read. After a long moment, he said, Because you're the first person in 50 years to enter this forest and feel anything other than terror. You were curious, even frightened, bleeding, hunted. You were curious about what I was. He took a slow sip. Do you know how rare that is? Most humans who learn of our existence want only to destroy us or flee us. You wanted to understand. Knowledge is survival. Elara stood, meeting his eyes despite the difference in their heights. The villagers called me cursed because I asked questions. Because I wanted to know why the stars moved. Why the old stones hummed during full moons. Why the boundary of the bloodwood never changes. They mistook curiosity for witchcraft. And is it? Constantine set down his glass. Witchcraft? I don't know. I never had anyone to teach me. The admission cost her something. The books I found were fragments. Journals from the old scholars. Grimoires with missing pages. I taught myself the script, but not what it means. Not really. Something shifted in Constantine's expression. Interest sharpening to focus. Show me. Elara hesitated, then reached into the inner pocket of her dress, pulling out the small journal she'd stolen from the village elder's study 3 years ago. The leather was cracked, the pages brittle, but the words inside were written in the old script, angular and precise. She opened to a random page and read aloud, translating as she went. The blood covenant binds house to house, oath to oath. Let none break faith, lest the shadow devour. Constantine was across the room in an instant, his hand on the journal, eyes scanning the page with an intensity that made her step back. When he looked up, something ancient moved behind his gaze. "Where did you get this?" The elder's locked chest. "Why, what is it?" "A fragment of the Treaty of Ash." His voice had gone quiet, dangerous. "The document that ended the house wars 3 centuries ago. This section deals with succession rights and blood oaths between vampire houses." He closed the book carefully, reverently. "This shouldn't exist outside house archives. If it's here, in a human village..." A sound cut through the night, glass shattering somewhere above them. Constantine's head snapped up, body going preternaturally still. Alara felt the temperature drop 10 degrees in an instant. "They've found us," he said softly. "But not your villagers. Something far worse. What? House Valdrin." He moved to the fireplace, pulling an iron poker from its stand with one smooth motion. In his hand, it looked less like a household tool and more like a weapon. "Stay behind me. Don't make a sound." And Alara... He glanced back at her, crimson eyes glowing brighter now, reflecting the firelight like a wolf's. "Whatever you see in the next few minutes, remember I told you that you could leave in the morning. I intend to keep that promise." Footsteps echoed overhead, slow, deliberate, multiple sets. The candlelight flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness broken only by the dying fire, and in that darkness, Constantine smiled. Chapter 3. House of Blood. The darkness wasn't empty. Alara's eyes adjusted slowly, and in the firelight's fading glow, she saw them descending the grand staircase. 3 figures dressed in silver and midnight blue, moving with the same liquid grace as Constantine. But where his presence felt like winter, cold and clean, theirs carried the weight of graves and rot. "Cousin." The word dripped from the woman in front. Tall and sharp-featured, her platinum hair swept into a severe knot. She wore the fashion of 100 years past, her gown's bustle and corset immaculate despite the rain outside. "How domestic you've become. Hiding in ruins, entertaining strays." Constantine didn't move from his position between Alara and the stairs. "Seraphine, you're trespassing." "Trespassing," she laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "In territory that should have been Valdrin's by right of conquest. You cling to this mausoleum and call it sovereignty." Her gaze slid past him to Alara, and the weight of that attention was crushing. "Is this what passes for entertainment now? A human girl, half-drowned and..." She paused, nostrils flaring. "Educated." "How peculiar." The 2 males flanking Seraphine spread out, circling the room with predatory efficiency. Both were dark-haired, cold-eyed, built like executioners. Alara's fingers found the knife at her belt, though she knew it was laughable. What could steel do against creatures who'd survived centuries? "State your business or leave." Constantine's voice had dropped to something subsonic, vibrating through Alara's bones. "Our business is the treaty you're violating." "Cousin." Seraphine descended the final steps, her movements serpentine. "Thornhaven may be your ancestral seat, but the Treaty of Ash is clear. No house may harbor humans with knowledge of the old script, not without declaring them to the council." Alara's heart stopped. "The journal. She's under my protection." Constantine's grip tightened on the poker. "Guest right supersedes treaty clause." "Guest right?" Seraphine's smile was venomous. "Or co-conspirator?" "We've had reports, Constantine. A village elder's chest broken into, a treaty fragment stolen. And now we find you sequestered here with a human girl who reads the script?" She tilted her head, mimicking Constantine's earlier gesture in a way that felt like mockery. "One might suspect you're planning something foolish. Like challenging the house structure. Or worse," her eyes glittered. "Attempting to invoke the old laws, the ones about elevation. That's insane." But Constantine's voice had lost its certainty. "Is it? You the last of House Thornhaven, alone for decades, slowly going mad with isolation. And here arrives a clever little human, one capable of reading the words that could theoretically transform her into enough. The word cracked like a whip. Seraphine's smile widened. So it is true. Oh, Constantine, the council will be fascinated. Everything happened at once. The male vampires lunged. Constantine moved, the poker swinging in an arc that caught the first attacker across the jaw, with a sound like a church bell struck wrong. The vampire staggered, hissing, fangs bared. The second came from the side, fast as lightning. But Constantine twisted, impossibly quick, and drove the poker into the creature's shoulder. Seraphine appeared behind Alara between one breath and the next. Cold fingers closed around Alara's throat, lifting her onto her toes. The knife fell from her nerveless hand, clattering on marble. Seraphine's face was inches from hers, beautiful and terrible. The perfection of a porcelain doll and just as lifeless. Let's see what you know. Little scholar. Pain exploded in Alara's skull, not physical, but something deeper, like hooks dragging through her thoughts. Memories surfaced unbidden. Nights studying by candlelight, tracing the strange symbols in her stolen journal, whispering the words aloud to feel their shape on her tongue. Deeper, the elder's chest, the lock she'd picked, the moment she'd first touched the cracked leather binding and felt something inside her recognize it. No. Alara grasped at the pain, pulling it close instead of pushing away. The elder had written notes in the margins, she remembered now. Notes in the common tongue. Something about bloodlines. About the original houses and their founding. About... Seraphine's grip vanished. Alara collapsed, gasping, as Constantine wrenched the vampire woman away with one hand around her throat. His other hand still held the poker, now dripping black ichor. Both male vampires lay unmoving on the floor, not dead but damaged enough to still them. You don't touch her. Each word was its own sentence. Seraphine clawed at his wrist, but Constantine's grip was iron. Then impossibly she began to laugh. You've already claimed her, haven't you? Even without the ritual. Oh, this is... Constantine slammed her against the wall hard enough to crack stone. Take your kindred and leave. Tell the council that House Thornhaven acknowledges no authority over its choice of guests. If they want to challenge that, they can come themselves instead of sending Veldrin dogs. He released her. Seraphine straightened her dress with exaggerated care, still smiling despite the rage burning in her eyes. The council will hear of this, all of it. The girl, the journal, your attachment. She collected her companions with a gesture, the males rising unsteadily. At the door, she paused. You have 3 days, Constantine. 3 days before they demand you surrender either the girl or the territory. Choose wisely. They were gone, leaving only the scent of old blood and older malice. Constantine turned to Alara, and she saw blood, black, not red, seeping from a wound in his side. That, he said quietly, is why you should have left when I first offered. Then, he collapsed. Chapter 4. The bleeding King Alara caught him before he hit the ground. Or rather, she tried to catch him. 7 feet of Vampire King was considerably heavier than she'd anticipated, and they went down together in a tangle of limbs, his weight pinning her against the cold marble. Up close, she could see the wound properly. A gash across his ribs, where one of the Valdrin males had struck with something she hadn't seen, something that left the edges of torn flesh smoking faintly. Silver. Constantine's voice was tight with pain. They had silver. Against treaty law, but Valdrin never cared for rules. He tried to push himself up and failed, jaw clenching. Upstairs. 3rd door. Medicine cabinet. Alara wriggled free, then hesitated. Every story she'd ever heard about vampires said they were immortal, unkillable, but the black blood pooling beneath him, the pallor creeping across his skin. That was death approaching, supernatural or not. Go. His eyes found hers, crimson dimming to rust. Or don't, your choice. You're not my prisoner. The words galvanized her. Alara ran. The manor was a maze of corridors and closed doors, but she found the 3rd door on the left, bursting into what had once been a bedchamber. The furniture was old but pristine, frozen in time. A 4-poster bed with velvet curtains, a vanity with an oval mirror, and against the far wall, A cabinet of dark wood, carved with symbols she recognized from her journal. Inside, bottles and vials, their contents mysterious, ground herbs, tinctures, something that glowed faintly blue. And there, on the bottom shelf, a roll of cloth bandages and a sealed jar labeled in the old script. Alara grabbed everything, her mind working frantically. The old script on the jar. She sounded it out as she ran back downstairs. Sanctified ash. For purification of wounds taken in darkness. Constantine hadn't moved. The pool of blood had spread, and his breathing came shallow and labored. Proof that whatever he was, he still needed breath. Alara knelt beside him, uncorking the jar. The ash inside was fine and gray, smelling of burned sage and something metallic. This might hurt, she warned. Everything hurts. But he turned his head to watch her with an expression caught between curiosity and resignation. You didn't leave. You saved my life. Alara pulled his shirt aside, revealing the wound. The flesh around it was blackened, spreading like poison. I'm not in the habit of abandoning people who've helped me. She packed ash into the wound, and Constantine's entire body went rigid, a sound tearing from his throat that was decidedly inhuman. The ash began to smoke on contact. And then, impossibly, the blackened flesh started to clear. Not quickly, but visibly, the silver's corruption retreating inch by inch. How did you know to use that? Constantine gasped when he could speak again. I didn't. I guessed. Alara continued working, packing the wound as she would any injury, her hands steady despite the strangeness of it all. The script on the jar mentioned purification. Silver is corrupt to vampires, yes? So I assumed, she glanced up. I'm making this up as I go. You're remarkable. The words were quiet, but they struck her harder than any of the night's violence. Heat flooded her face. I'm useless. Everyone said so. Then everyone was blind. Constantine caught her wrist. Gently this time. Not restraining, just touching. His skin was still cool, but warming gradually as the ash did its work. You read a language no one taught you. You solved a problem in seconds that would have killed me in minutes. You stayed when you could have fled. His thumb brushed across the ink stains on her fingers. They called you worthless, because they didn't understand your worth. There's a difference. Alara swallowed against the sudden tightness in her throat. No one had ever... Why did Seraphine mention elevation? She forced herself to focus on the practical, the solvable. What is that? Constantine's expression shuddered. A fairy tale. An old law from before the houses formalized their structure. Tell me anyway. He sighed, sitting up slowly with her help. The wound had closed to an angry red line, no longer bleeding. In the earliest nights, when vampires were newly made and still experimenting with what we could do, there was a practice called elevation. A vampire could choose a human companion, not a servant or a victim, but a partner, and through a ritual of blood and consent, transform them into a vampire themselves. An equal. Why would that threaten the council? Because elevated vampires were never bound by house loyalty. They owed allegiance only to the one who made them, creating power structures outside the council's control. So they banned it, made it punishable by permanent death. He met her eyes. Seraphine thinks I brought you here to elevate you, to create an ally, or what? A queen. The word hung between them. House Thornhaven is old, Alara. Older than Valdrin, older than half the council. I have the right to claim a consort, to rebuild my house. But for centuries, I've had no interest. The politics, the games, I wanted no part of it. His hand was still on her wrist, and he seemed to realize it, withdrawing slowly. Until tonight, when Seraphine looked at you and I understood that I would kill anyone who tried to harm you. Which is foolish because we've known each other for approximately 3 hours. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. So what happens now? She gave you 3 days. Now? Constantine stood, offering her his hand and pulling her to her feet. Now I teach you what that journal actually means, and you help me figure out what the Valdrin House truly wants. Because this isn't about you or me. That treaty fragment you found, it's valuable for a reason. What reason? His smile was grim. That's what we have 3 days to discover, before the council decides we're both too dangerous to live. Chapter 5. Secrets in the Dark. They moved to the library as dawn approached. A vast room lined floor to ceiling with books, many so old their spines had cracked to leather dust. Constantine lit the fire with a gesture, then drew heavy curtains across the windows, blocking the growing light outside. "I won't burn in sunlight," he said, catching her curious look. "Not immediately, but it weakens me, makes me vulnerable, easier to kill." He settled into a chair that creaked under his weight, still favoring his wounded side. "I'll need to rest soon. You should as well. I'm not tired." A lie. Ilara was exhausted to her bones, but her mind raced too fast for sleep. She pulled out the journal, laying it on the desk between them. "Show me what I've been reading." For the next hour, Constantine explained. The Treaty of Ash had ended 3 centuries of war between the vampire houses, establishing territories, rules of engagement, and most importantly, the Council, 7 representatives from the oldest houses, tasked with mediating disputes and preventing the kind of carnage that had nearly destroyed their species. "The section you have deals with blood oaths," Constantine said, tracing the old script with one finger. "When 2 houses want to formalize an alliance, they perform a ritual. Blood given freely, mixed in wine, consumed by both parties. It creates a bond that can't be broken except by death or mutual agreement. Like a marriage. Similar, but deeper. A blood oath means you feel what the other feels. Not thoughts, but emotions, pain. Betray them, and the oath turns poisonous." He looked up. "This fragment specifically describes the oath between Thornhaven and..." He paused, reading more carefully. "Valdren. 7 generations ago." Ilara's breath caught. "You're allied with them?" "Were. My grandfather swore the oath with Seraphine's grandfather. It was meant to end a territorial dispute." Constantine's expression darkened. "But 3 generations later, House Valdren claimed Thornhaven broke the oath by sheltering humans during the purges. My father fought them in the council, but he was outvoted. Valdren absorbed half our territory and most of our vassals. I'm all that remains. So Seraphine wants to finish what her ancestors started. More than that." Constantine stood, moving to a shelf and pulling down a larger tome, this one bound in red leather, its pages edged in gold. "If she can prove I violated the treaty by sheltering you, she can claim guest right was forfeit. Which means you murdered her kindred when you attacked them," Ilara finished, understanding crystallizing. "Not self-defense. Aggression against House Valdren." "Exactly. The council would strip me of Thornhaven entirely, likely grant it to Valdren as recompense." He set the book down heavily. "And they'd execute me for good measure." Silence settled between them, broken only by the fire's crackle. Outside, Ilara could hear birds beginning their morning songs. The ordinary world, continuing obliviously while monsters plotted in shadows. "Why did you save me?" The question emerged before she could stop it. "You knew what it would cost. You could have let Seraphine take me," claimed ignorance. Constantine regarded her steadily. "Would you have done that? If our positions were reversed?" "No." "Then you have your answer." He moved closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. This close, she could see details she'd missed before. The way his pupils expanded and contracted like a cat's, the faint blue tracery of veins beneath his too pale skin, the small scar above his left eyebrow, proof that he'd been human once, long ago. "I've lived 247 years, Ilara. I've seen empires rise and fall, watched the people I knew as humans grow old and die, then their children, then their grandchildren. I've accumulated wealth and power and all the things vampires are supposed to want, and for the last 50 years, I've been utterly, crushingly alone." His hand rose, hesitating, then gently brushed a strand of damp hair from her face. The touch was cool but careful, reverent. "Then you stumbled into my forest, bleeding and terrified and still curious enough to ask questions. You looked at me and saw a person, not a monster or a means to an end. You stayed even when I gave you the chance to flee. You saved my life with nothing but intuition and stolen knowledge." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Don't ask me to explain why I chose your life over politics. Some things don't have rational explanations." Ilara's pulse thundered in her ears. "You barely know me. I know you're brave. I know you're brilliant. I know that when everyone else told you that you were worthless, you taught yourself to read dead languages to prove them wrong. His hand cupped her cheek now, thumb tracing the line of her jaw. I know that you're the first person in half a century who's made me want to fight for something beyond mere survival. She should step back. This was madness. A vampire king and a human girl called useless. The world aligned against them, 3 days before everything collapsed. But instead, Alara found herself leaning into his touch, her hand coming up to cover his. I'm terrified, she admitted. So am I. Constantine's smile was small and sad. But perhaps we can be terrified together. Outside, the sun crested the horizon. Constantine flinched, color draining from his face, and Alara felt him sway. Come on. She took his arm, bearing more of his weight than seemed possible. You need to rest. We both do. The guest room... No. Alara's voice was firm. You're injured and I'm not leaving you alone. Wherever you sleep, I'm staying with you. Just in case. Constantine looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. Then he nodded. The master bedchamber. This way. They climbed the stairs together as dawn broke over Thornhaven, 2 lost souls seeking shelter in the dark. Chapter 6. The Scholar's Gift. The master bedchamber was exactly what Alara expected from a vampire king. Opulent and archaic, dominated by an enormous 4-poster bed draped in midnight blue velvet. Heavy curtains covered the windows, blocking every trace of sunlight. In the dimness, candles flickered to life at Constantine's presence, casting dancing shadows across furniture that belonged in a museum. The bed is yours, Constantine said, moving toward a chaise longue in the corner. I don't truly sleep as humans do. I'll rest here. That's ridiculous. You're wounded. Alara steered him toward the bed with surprising force. Lie down before you collapse again. Bossy, he murmured, but complied, stretching out atop the covers with a sigh that sounded almost human. The wound across his ribs had healed to a thin silver line, but exhaustion lined his face. You should sleep too. We'll need our strength when night falls. Alara removed her boots, then, after a moment's hesitation, climbed onto the other side of the massive bed, maintaining a careful distance between them. The mattress was surprisingly soft, the pillows filled with down that smelled faintly of lavender and thyme. Tell me about elevation, she said into the quiet. Constantine turned his head on the pillow to look at her. Why? Because Seraphine was afraid when she mentioned it, and because you said it creates equals, not servants. I want to understand what she thinks we're planning. He was quiet for so long that Alara thought he might have drifted into whatever passed for vampire sleep. Then, the ritual requires 3 things. First, genuine consent from both parties, not coerced, not bought, but freely given. Second, blood exchange performed during the dark moon, when the barrier between life and death is thinnest. Third, he paused, an oath spoken in the old script, binding maker to maid, swearing to protect, to honor, to share power equally. And the result? A new vampire, yes, but one unbound by house politics. They carry their maker's strength, but answer to no council, follow no territorial laws. In the old nights, elevated vampires were wild things, loyal only to their chosen partners, impossible to control. His hand found hers in the darkness between them. The council banned it because it threatened their authority. But the real reason they fear it is simpler. Elevated vampires are created in love, not politics. And love makes people unpredictable. Alara's throat felt tight. Is that what you want? To elevate me? I want you to live. Constantine's thumb traced circles on her palm, the gesture unconscious, soothing. Everything else is secondary. If we survive the council, if we find a way to neutralize Valdrin's threat, then... His expression was vulnerable in the candlelight. Then I would want what you wanted. Nothing more. That's not an answer, isn't it? He shifted closer, closing the distance between them. I've been alone for so long, Alara. The thought of having someone who understands me, who chooses to stay not out of duty or fear, but because they want to... He broke off, jaw tightening. but I won't trap you in immortality just to ease my loneliness. That would make me no better than the monsters you fled." Ilara studied him in the flickering light. This ancient, powerful creature who'd killed to protect her, who'd risked his territory and his life for a human girl he'd known for less than a day, who spoke of consent and choice like they were sacred things. "I don't think you're a monster," she said softly. Constantine's eyes closed. "You should. It would be safer." They fell silent then. But Constantine didn't release her hand, and Ilara didn't pull away. Sleep crept over her slowly, exhaustion finally winning. She woke to screaming. Ilara bolted upright, heart hammering. Constantine was already off the bed, moving toward the window with inhuman speed. Outside the sun had set. How long had they slept? And in the darkness beyond Thornhaven's walls, torches burned. "Valdrin," Constantine growled. "They've brought reinforcements." Ilara joined him at the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. At least 20 vampires surrounded the manor, all wearing Valdrin's silver and blue, and at their head, Seraphine smiled up at the window like she could see them in the darkness. "Constantine," her voice carried, amplified by something unnatural. "The council has spoken. You have 1 hour to surrender the human and the treaty fragment. Refuse, and we'll take Thornhaven by force." She cut off mid-sentence, staggering suddenly. The vampires around her scattered, shouting, and Ilara saw why. The ground beneath their feet had begun to glow. Lines of pale blue light spreading outward from Thornhaven's foundation in geometric patterns. "What?" Ilara breathed. Constantine's expression had shifted from grim to shocked. "You did this. I didn't do anything." "The journal." He grabbed her shoulders, eyes blazing. "Last night when you read the oath passage aloud, you pronounced it perfectly, didn't you?" "Yes, but old script isn't just written language. It's spell work. And you..." He laughed suddenly, the sound edged with something wild. "You activated Thornhaven's blood wards. The original protections my grandfather wove into this land when he swore the oath with Valdrin's grandfather." Below, Seraphine had recovered, but the other vampires looked uncertain, unwilling to cross the glowing lines. "What does it do?" Ilara asked. "It prevents anyone bound by blood oath from attacking Thornhaven's master or his chosen guests." Constantine pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. "You brilliant, impossible girl. You just made this fortress impregnable to half the council. Chosen guests?" Ilara's voice came out breathless, caught between fear and something else entirely. "It recognized you." His hands framed her face. "The wards respond to intent, to connection. Somehow, in one night, Thornhaven has decided you belong here." Below, Seraphine screamed fury into the darkness. Chapter 7. The Price of Loyalty for 3 hours. The Valdrin forces tested the wards, sending lesser vampires to probe the boundaries, hurling objects to see if they'd penetrate, even attempting to tunnel beneath the glowing lines. Nothing worked. Each time something crossed the threshold, blue light flared brighter, and whatever had attempted entry was thrown back with bone-breaking force. Constantine watched from the tower window, Ilara beside him, their shoulders touching in the cramped space. He'd explained the wards in detail. Ancient magic, blood-sworn, nearly impossible to break. But nearly wasn't completely, and they both knew it. "They'll petition the council to forcibly dissolve the ward," Constantine said quietly. "Probably by tomorrow night. That gives us perhaps 2 days to prepare." "Prepare how?" Ilara's mind raced through possibilities. "We can't fight them all." "No, but we can bargain." He turned from the window, taking her hand and leading her back down the spiral staircase to the library. Once there, he pulled the red leather tome from yesterday, flipping through pages rapidly. "The treaty fragment you found, it's valuable because it proves something the council wants forgotten." "What?" "That the original blood oath between Thornhaven and Valdrin included a termination clause. 7 generations, then renewal or dissolution." His finger traced the old script. "We're now at Generation 8. The oath is void, which means Valdrin has no legal claim to your territory," Ilara finished, understanding dawning. "They've been operating under an expired agreement for decades." "Exactly. If I can prove that to the council, Seraphine loses all leverage." Constantine's smile was sharp as a blade. But I need the complete treaty, not just your fragment. And the original is held in the Council's archive, which is in Valdrin territory, Ilara guessed from his expression. In the capital, yes. 3 days' journey. He set the book down heavily. I'd need to leave tonight, travel fast, and hope I can argue my case before Seraphine convinces the Council that I'm harboring dangerous heretics. Then go. Ilara's voice was steady despite her fear. I'll be safe here. The wards will hold. Against vampires, yes. But there are other threats. Humans, thralls, daylight attacks. I'll manage. She met his eyes. You saved my life, Constantine. Let me help save yours. He studied her for a long moment, and Ilara saw the war playing out behind his expression. The need to protect her warring with the practical necessity of retrieving the treaty. Finally, he nodded. There's something else. He moved to a locked cabinet, producing a key from inside his shirt. Iron, ancient, worn smooth by centuries of handling. The cabinet opened to reveal weapons, silver daggers, crossbows, and one item that made Ilara's breath catch. A crown. It was delicate, wrought from white gold and set with stones that caught the firelight like trapped stars. But it wasn't the beauty that struck her. It was the way Constantine held it, reverently, like something infinitely precious and equally painful. The crown of Thornhaven, he said softly. Worn by every ruler of this house since its founding. My father wore it, my grandfather, back and back through the centuries. He turned it in his hands. If I fall, if Seraphine kills me or the Council executes me, I need you to take this to House Marchand. They're neutral, scholarly. They'll protect you. I don't want it. Ilara stepped back. I want you to survive and wear it yourself. Ilara, no. Her voice shook. You're not going to die. We're going to fix this and then... She faltered, not knowing how to finish the sentence. Constantine set the crown aside and closed the distance between them, his hands finding her face with aching gentleness. Then what? The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Then maybe I'll stay, if you'll have me. Not as a prisoner or a ward, but as, she swallowed hard, as whatever you want me to be. What I want, Constantine said slowly, is for you to be exactly who you are. Brilliant, stubborn, unafraid to tell me when I'm being an idiot. His thumb brushed across her lower lip, and Ilara's breath hitched. What I want is to have time, years, decades, to learn everything about you. What makes you laugh? What haunts your dreams? What you look like when you're so absorbed in reading that you forget the world exists. That's a long time to know someone, Ilara whispered. Yes. His forehead touched hers. It is, the moment stretched, charged with possibility. Ilara could feel his breath, cool, barely there, against her skin. Could see the way his eyes had darkened to deep burgundy, the way his jaw tensed like he was holding himself back by force of will alone. I'm not fragile, she said. I know. I'm not afraid of you. You should be. But even as he said it, he was drawing her closer, one arm circling her waist while his other hand cradled the back of her neck. I'm afraid of myself right now, of how much I want. Ilara rose on her toes and kissed him. For a heartbeat, Constantine went perfectly still. Then he made a sound low in his throat, relief or surrender or both, and kissed her back. His mouth was cool, but his touch was fire, one hand fisting in her hair while the other pressed her against him until no space remained between them. The kiss was gentle despite its intensity, reverent, like he was memorizing the shape of her lips, the taste of her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard. Well, she was breathing hard. Constantine looked dazed. Ilara smiled. For luck, she said. Come back to me. Always, he promised. Then he was gone, disappearing into the night like smoke, leaving Ilara alone in Thornhaven with a crown, a journal, and the ghost of his kiss burning on her lips. Chapter 8. Blood and Promises. Constantine returned on the third dawn, and Ilara knew immediately that something had changed. She'd been watching from the tower window, sleepless, when she saw him approaching, not walking, but running, covering ground with impossible speed. Behind him the sky was lightening dangerously, pink and gold creeping across the horizon. The wards parted for him like water, and Alara raced down the stairs, meeting him in the entry hall just as he stumbled through the door. His clothes were torn, black blood staining his shirt, and he carried a leather satchel clutched to his chest like salvation. "Got it," he gasped, then collapsed to his knees. Alara caught him, bearing his weight as best she could. "What happened?" "Seraphine. She knew I'd come for the treaty. Ambush." He pressed the satchel into her hands. "Take it, hide it. If they breach the wards, they won't." But even as Alara said it, she heard sounds outside, chanting in the old script, multiple voices raised in unison. Through the windows she saw the wards beginning to flicker. "They've brought a council overseer." Constantine's voice was fading. "Someone neutral, powerful enough to temporarily suspend the wards while they investigate my alleged crimes." He looked up at her, and his eyes were desperate. "I'm sorry. I failed you." "No." Alara pulled him to his feet with surprising strength. "You're not dying in my hallway. Come on." She half dragged him to the library, depositing him in the largest chair. The wound across his chest was worse than before, deep, smoking faintly with silver poisoning. But when she reached for the sanctified ash, Constantine caught her wrist. "There's another way." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "To heal me, to make the wards permanent, to give us a fighting chance." Alara's heart stopped. "Elevation. Not complete. Not yet." Constantine straightened with visible effort. "But a blood bond. The first step. If you consent to share blood with me, not to turn you, just to link us, I can heal, and the wards will recognize you as more than a guest, as Thornhaven's chosen partner. And the cost? You'll feel what I feel. Pain, hunger, emotion. The bond works both ways." His hand trembled as it cupped her cheek, and once formed, it can only be broken by death or by completing the elevation ritual. There's no going back to being strangers. Outside, the chanting grew louder. The wards flickered again, blue light stuttering. Alara's mind raced. 3 days ago, she'd been fleeing a village that wanted her dead, convinced she was worthless. Now she stood in a vampire's ancient library, being offered a bond that would tie her fate to a creature she barely knew. It was insane. It was terrifying. It was also the easiest decision she'd ever made. "Teach me the words," she said. Constantine's expression cracked, relief and fear warring across his features. "Alara, teach me, now, before I lose my nerve or they break through." He nodded, pulling her close. In the old script, he spoke the oath, each word careful, precise. Alara repeated them, feeling the strange shape of the language on her tongue, the way the air seemed to thicken around them. "I offer my blood freely given, my strength shared without reservation, my fate bound to yours in darkness and in light. Let none sever what two souls have joined." "Your turn," Alara whispered. Constantine spoke his own oath, the words a mirror of hers. Then, with infinite care, he raised his wrist to his mouth. His fangs extended. She watched, fascinated, as they lengthened from normal canines into something designed to pierce. And he bit down into his own flesh. Black blood welled up, and he offered his wrist to her. "Drink, just a little." Alara hesitated only a moment before pressing her lips to the wound. The taste was strange, copper and smoke and something indefinable, ancient. Power flooded her mouth, cold and sharp, and she felt it race through her veins like lightning. The library spun, and she might have fallen if Constantine hadn't been holding her. "Now me," he said roughly, and gently, so gently, he tilted her head to expose her throat. The first touch of his fangs was a pinprick. Then pressure. Then... Alara gasped as sensation overwhelmed her. Not pain, but its opposite. Pleasure that bordered on overwhelming. She felt Constantine's hunger, yes, but also his careful control, his fierce determination not to take too much, not to hurt her. And beneath that, something deeper, the staggering force of his loneliness. Decades of isolation and now the fragile, burning hope that maybe, finally, he wouldn't be alone anymore. He pulled back after only seconds, but those seconds had changed everything. Alara stumbled, and Constantine caught her, both of them sinking to the floor together. She could feel him now, feel his presence like a second heartbeat in her chest, his wound closing as her blood worked through him, his strength returning. "I feel you," she whispered. "And I you." Constantine pressed his forehead to hers. "Brave, brilliant girl. You're burning so bright I can barely stand it." Outside there was a sound like thunder, and the wards flared blindingly bright, then stabilized. The blue light now shot through with crimson. The chanting cut off abruptly, replaced by confused shouting. Constantine laughed, the sound edged with exhaustion and relief. "You did it. The wards recognize you now. They'll hold against anything short of the full council." Alara touched her throat, feeling the 2 small punctures already healing. "What happens now?" "Now?" He pulled the satchel close, opening it to reveal ancient parchment covered in the old script. "We prove that House Valdrin has been operating under false pretenses for 50 years. And then," his smile was fierce, "we make them pay." Chapter 9. The council's judgment. The council arrived at midnight, and they came in force. Alara watched from the tower window as 7 figures materialized from the darkness, each one radiating power that made the air shimmer. They wore formal robes in their house colors, crimson, violet, emerald, gold, and their faces were ancient, cold, bearing the weight of centuries. Seraphine stood apart from them, her expression triumphant. But as the council approached Thornhaven's gates, something changed. The wards didn't part for them. Instead, the blue and crimson light pulsed brighter, and a voice rang out. Constantine's, amplified by the manor's magic. "Council of the 7 houses, you are recognized. Enter as guests under truce law and bear witness to the evidence House Thornhaven presents in its defense." The lead counselor, a woman with silver hair and eyes like chips of black ice, inclined her head. "We accept guest right, Lord Thornhaven. The council comes in judgment, not in conquest." The wards parted. Alara met Constantine at the base of the stairs. He'd changed into formal attire, a black coat with silver fastenings, his hair pulled back, the crown of Thornhaven resting on his brow. He looked every inch the ancient king he was, but when his eyes found hers, they softened. "Stay close," he murmured, taking her hand. "The bond will help. They'll sense you're under my protection." Together, they entered the great hall. The council had arranged themselves in a semicircle, with Seraphine standing to one side, practically vibrating with anticipation. The silver-haired woman stepped forward, her gaze cataloging everything. Constantine, Alara, the way their hands were joined. "Lord Constantine of House Thornhaven," she said formally. "You stand accused of harboring humans with forbidden knowledge, violating territorial treaties, and murdering vassals of House Valdrin in unprovoked attack. How do you answer these charges?" "With evidence, Councillor Marchand." Constantine's voice was steady, carrying no trace of the wounded vampire she'd helped 3 nights ago. "If the council will permit." Marchand gestured assent. Constantine produced the treaty from the leather satchel, unfolding it carefully. "The Treaty of Ash, Section 7, Subsection 3. The blood oath between House Thornhaven and House Valdrin, sworn 7 generations ago. Lady Seraphine claims I violated this oath by sheltering the human woman, Alara, who possesses knowledge of the old script." "A clear violation," Seraphine interjected. "As I've stated, however," Constantine continued, his voice cutting through hers like a blade, "the treaty explicitly states that the oath lasts 7 generations, then requires renewal or dissolution. We are currently in the 8th generation since its signing. The oath is void. House Valdrin has no legal claim to enforce its terms, which means..." He looked directly at Seraphine. "You have been operating under false authority for 50 years. Every territory you claimed, every vassal you absorbed, every challenge you brought before this council was predicated on an oath that no longer exists." Silence crashed through the hall. Seraphine's face went white with rage. That's impossible. My grandfather swore. Your grandfather swore a 7-generation oath in 1726. Constantine's smile was sharp. This is 1974. Calculate the generations yourself, Seraphine. You've been claiming authority you haven't possessed since before I was born. Marchand took the treaty, examining it closely. The other counselors leaned in, their ancient faces betraying nothing. After a long moment, Marchand looked up. The documentation appears genuine. Lord Constantine's interpretation is correct. The oath has expired. Her gaze shifted to Seraphine. House Valdrin, you have been misrepresenting your legal standing to this council for decades. This is a grave offense. But the girl... Seraphine gestured wildly at Alara. She still possesses forbidden knowledge. That's a separate violation. Actually, Alara said, stepping forward. It isn't. All eyes turned to her. Constantine's hand tightened on hers, lending strength. The treaty forbids teaching humans the old script, Alara continued, her voice surprisingly steady. I wasn't taught. I taught myself, from fragments of texts that were already in the human world. There's no prohibition against natural learning, is there, counselor? Marchand's expression shifted. Was that approval? The girl makes a valid point. The treaty assumes vampire disclosure, not human discovery. And the murders? Seraphine's voice had risen to a near shout. He killed my kindred. In defense of a guest under his protection, Constantine countered. Your kindred invaded my territory, attacked my home, and attempted to abduct someone I had explicitly claimed guest right over. The treaty allows lethal force in defense of one's domain. But she's... Seraphine cut herself off, but too late. She's what? Constantine's voice dropped dangerously. Human? Under my protection? Bonded to me by blood oath? He pushed up his sleeve, revealing the faint mark where Alara had drunk from him. A silvery scar that glowed faintly in the candlelight. Or is your real objection that House Thornhaven has found an ally you can't control? Marchand studied the scar, then looked at Alara's throat, where the twin punctures had healed but left similar marks. You've initiated a blood bond. With her full consent? Constantine confirmed. Witnessed by Thornhaven's wards, which even now recognize her as co-sovereign of this house. The council erupted in murmurs. Seraphine looked ready to attack, but two of the counselors moved subtly to block her. Marchand raised one hand, and silence fell. The council finds as follows. House Valdrin's claims are based on an expired oath and are therefore invalid. Lord Constantine acted within his rights in defending his domain. The human, Alara, has committed no violation of treaty law. She paused, her gaze intense. However, the formation of a blood bond is unusual. The council would know your intentions, Lord Thornhaven. Constantine stood straighter. To rebuild House Thornhaven, to claim my consort, to ensure that the age of houses built on fear and control ends, replaced by something better. Revolution, Marchand said softly. You speak of revolution. I speak of choice. Constantine pulled Alara close. This council has stood for 3 centuries, yes. But perhaps it's time for something new. Marchand smiled. Actually smiled. Perhaps it is. The council withdraws. House Valdrin, you will return all territories claimed under the false oath. Lord Constantine, you have our interest. Then they were gone, dissolving into shadow. Only Seraphine remained, and her expression promised murder. Chapter 10. The fierce Queen Seraphine attacked the moment the council vanished, moving with speed that would have been invisible if Alara hadn't felt it through the bond. Constantine's warning flaring in her mind a split second before the vampire lunged. Alara dove left as Constantine intercepted Seraphine mid-strike, the impact of their collision cracking the marble floor. You've destroyed everything, Seraphine shrieked, clawing at Constantine's face. 50 years of careful planning, of positioning Valdrin to dominate the council, and you... Constantine threw her back with brutal efficiency. You built your house on lies and expired agreements. I simply revealed the truth. Seraphine landed in a crouch, fangs bared, and Alara saw murder in her eyes. The vampire's gaze fixed on her, the weakest target, the human who'd caused all this chaos. and Alara knew what was coming. Through the bond, she felt Constantine's sudden terror, his desperate calculation of whether he could intercept in time. He couldn't. Seraphine blurred into motion, crossing the hall in a blink, but Alara had spent 3 days studying the manor, learning its secrets from Constantine during stolen moments between research sessions. She'd discovered that Thornhaven responded to intent, to belonging. And now, bonded to Constantine, recognized by the wards, Alara threw her hand out and shouted a word in the old script. "Valier!" The wards answered. Blue and crimson light erupted from the walls, forming a barrier that caught Seraphine mid-lunge and hurled her backward with the force of a catapult. The vampire smashed into the far wall hard enough to crater the stone, then slid to the ground, dazed. Constantine was at Alara's side instantly. "How did you— Your house recognizes me," Alara said, still shocked at what she'd done. "You said so yourself." Seraphine struggled to her feet, but slowly, damaged. "This isn't over, little human. You think you've won, but you've only painted a target on both your backs. The council may tolerate you now, but there are other houses, older, crueler. They'll come for you, for what you represent. Let them come." Constantine's arm circled Alara's waist, and she felt his fierce protectiveness through the bond, mixed with pride and something deeper. Love. Still fragile, still new, but unmistakable. House Thornhaven stands, and we don't stand alone. "You stand with a human who'll be dead in 50 years, Seraphine spat, "while you remain eternal and unchanging. That's the joke of it all, cousin. You've bonded yourself to mortality." "Actually," Alara said quietly, "we've been meaning to discuss that." Seraphine's eyes widened. "No, you wouldn't dare." Constantine looked down at Alara, question in his gaze. They danced around this conversation for 3 days, both knowing where it led, neither willing to push. But now, with Seraphine's words hanging in the air, with the possibility of a future stretching before them, "I want to stay," Alara said. "Not as a guest, not as a temporary ally, as your equal, your partner." She took his face in her hands, making him meet her eyes. "I want elevation. I want immortality. I want centuries to learn everything about you, to build something new with you. If you'll have me..." Constantine's careful control cracked. Ilara, I've wanted that since the moment you chose to stay and save my life instead of fleeing. But I needed you to choose it, freely, without coercion or desperation. I'm choosing it now." She smiled. "Though if you want me to wait until we're not being threatened by your insane cousin..." He kissed her, fierce and claiming, pouring 300 years of loneliness and 3 days of desperate hope into the press of his lips. When they broke apart, his fangs had descended fully, and his eyes blazed crimson. "The dark moon is tonight," he said roughly. "We can perform the ritual immediately, if you're certain." "I've never been more certain of anything." Seraphine screamed rage and lunged again, but this time Constantine was ready. He moved with a speed Alara could barely track, catching Seraphine by the throat and slamming her into the floor hard enough to crack stone. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of centuries. "House Valdrin is no longer welcome in Thornhaven. Leave now, or I invoke Bloodright and end you permanently." Seraphine thrashed, then went still, recognizing the threat. "This isn't over," she hissed one final time. "Yes," Constantine said coldly. "It is." He released her, and she fled into the night, defeated. Silence settled over the hall. Then Constantine turned to Alara, and all the fierceness melted into something tender. "Are you truly ready for this? For eternity?" Alara thought of the village that had called her useless, of the lonely years teaching herself forbidden knowledge by candlelight, of Constantine's hand finding hers in the darkness, of the bond between them that sang with possibility. "I was ready the moment I chose to stay." Epilogue. 6 months later, Alara stood in Thornhaven's restored throne room, wearing a gown of midnight blue and the crown of Thornhaven resting light on her brow. Through the windows the sun was setting, and for the first time in her new immortal existence, she could watch it without fear, the daylight merely uncomfortable rather than deadly. Constantine sat beside her in his own throne, their hands joined between them. Through the bond, she felt his contentment, deep and abiding, mixed with fierce pride as he watched her address the gathered vampires, representatives from 6 houses, come to witness the coronation of House Thornhaven's new queen. "The old ways are ending," Alara said, her voice carrying through the hall. "No more will power be built on fear and control. House Thornhaven stands for something different. Choice, consent, partnership. Any who would join us are welcome." In the crowd, she saw nods, heard murmurs of agreement. Change was coming to the vampire world, and they had started it. One little girl called Useless, and one lonely king who'd seen her worth. That night, Constantine led her to the tower, where the dark moon hung overhead, and they renewed their vows under the stars. When they kissed, power sang between them, equal, fierce, eternal. The girl the world had deemed worthless had become a queen, and together they would reshape the night.